नमस्कार, जय शंकर, जय गुरु और दुर्गा माता की जय. This is sequential reading of the book Paradevta, God the Mother, by Swami Shri Ishwarnanda Giriji Maharaj. And before I come to the chapter 4, which is Bhava-Devta, which is also given the title Mother's Side Glance by Swamiji. Let me try to see if I can play this conch shell, Shankh. So we have शंख चक्र गदा पद्म. So विष्णु भगवान के हाथ में ये चारों, तो उसमें से सिर्फ शंख है जो आप अपने हाथ में ले सकते हो आराम से. यू वोंट फाइंड लोटस फ्लावर एवरीवेयर, एंड गदा एंड शंख चक्र we won't have. So what we can have is this. You can have it and see if we can play it. Right, I did a little practice. Let me see if I successfully play it again. Okay. So before I begin to read the book, I'll share a secret of playing the conch shell, which I figured out. You need to hold it in a certain fashion that the flow of air through your uh, funk, 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 I don't know what we say in English. So that should align in such a way that it creates proper sound. Otherwise, it won't work out. So usually, speaking, if we hold it like this and then more practice, more easy to do anything right. So that's why they say practice makes a man perfect. Let me see where we are by Swamiji's grace. The title of fourth chapter is Bhava-Devta, Mother's Side Glance. The practice of yoga was described in the last verse. It is impossible to implement yoga without developing detachment of mind. The Yoga Sutra asserts Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tannirodha. The yoga of Chitta Nirodha is attained only by Abhyas and Vairagya. They both should go together. Very often, a sadhaka in his first impulse of spiritual enthusiasm takes to meditation and praying in solitude. He's not aware that he's only churning an empty vessel or a vessel full of mere water, and that he has no right to expect the butter to rise. But alas, he does. And then gets frustrated and starts doubting either the efficacy of yoga or his eligibility for it. The fact is that abhyasa is only a process or technique that should be applied to a mind already purified and developed to such a consistency that it responds to the technique. That consistency is vairagya. It is vairagya that will be transformed into realization, says the Acharya in Viveka Chudamani. If vairagya is the flower, self knowledge is the fruit, whose sweet juice is complete emancipation. So, though abhyasa or the technique is stressed and mentioned first in practical yoga, we must recognize vairagya as of foremost importance in the path of realization. Sadhakas practicing yoga and not making much headway are in the habit of referring their failures to external factors and obstacles, to situations such as noisy towns or corrupt atmosphere, to social obligation towards wife, children, boss, or colleagues, to personal physical necessities or handicaps, to wasting time in earning bread, to disease of the body or demands of the weather, or even the distractions of bugs and mosquitoes. But this is a great illusion. The root of all obstruction in yoga is internal. To make him realize this, the sadhaka is asked, if they are all so bad, why don't you do away with them and see? Can you give up the body? Is it advisable to do so? If you must put up with this body and do yoga, then you can as well put up with other bodies around you. Indeed, it is perfectly normal and desirable that a body is sustained by these other contacts. Then alone one will be led to Vairagya, the precious ingredient in spiritual alchemy. The body and its contacts are so structured by nature as to evoke this Vairagya. Therefore, if one applying himself to sadhana does not develop Vairagya, it is as much a surprise and a matter of concern as when someone eats his fill and yet is not nourished. It is in this sense that the poet exclaims in the sixth verse, Na kaschit virajyati aho. In justifying this wonder, the poet proceeds to explain the nature of things. First of all, this body, sharire ati kashte, realization of the ephemeral nature of the body is an easy and unfailing means to vairagya. Acharya Sureshwara says in 1 on having direct experience of the foul nature of one's own body, one does not get vairagya. We are sure there is no other means for him in all the three worlds to achieve it. And yet, rare is the person who is not overwhelmingly attached to this body. If he says it is so because he has to be with the body day in and day out, we point out that it is equally true of his house or pen or spectacles or clothes. But in case of destruction of any of these articles, does he feel the same pangs of total loss or self annihilation as in the case of his body? If the house is afire, will he still linger in it? And that is what the body there indicates, a house on fire. Be it the delicate child's or the fiery youth's or the decaying old man's body. In youth, there is such a spurt of energy that man becomes too reckless to notice the drastic changes overtaking him and warning signals on his path. Exulting in his own physical richness, he rushes on like a mountain stream, which, alas, is reduced to a mere trickle when the season of rains is over. Giri Nadi Vegopamam Yavanam. Then where is the beauty of this physical frame and the pride in possessing it? Even in youth, when the body is afire, it is a flowing mass of lava. There is torment at every step in the path of passion, either in fulfillment or in frustration. And then the possibility of disease and death are there at every stage, especially in a course dedicated fiercely to squeezing every drop of sensual pleasure out of life. Boge roga bhayam. One has only to visit the general ward of a hospital in some big city to realize this. A crematorium or a graveyard does not affect you so dramatically as the living hell of the hospital ward. And you realize intensely that you are carrying that hell potentially all the time with you. If, in spite of this, you cling to this body, it can only be an abnormality called raga. And the only means to remove is vairagya. Suppose we give a license to this particular deep rooted attachment to the body by arguing that the body is, after all, needed for spiritual practice, and therefore one may be pardoned for one's fondness for it. The question of the rationality of one's clinging to offspring and others related to the body remains unsolved. This shloka under our consideration, therefore, raises the question with a startling statement. Ripau putra varge. The son is veritably a foe, and yet one is infatuated with him. The son is the enemy because of his very nature. The more you dote on him, the greater is the force he exerts to tear himself away from you. He feels suffocated by your hold on him. He wishes to grow, be free, and feel his own dimensions, and your love, instead of helping him in this, merely tries to exploit him as one of the sources of your enjoyment. The son unconsciously revolts against such exploitation, and your very passion begins to burn you and aggravate your frustration. Therefore, the masters have warned the father of this perilous attitude, exposing its futility in various ways. अलभ्यमानस्तनयः पितरु क्लेशयेच्छिरं लब्धोऽपि गर्भत्वेन प्रसवेन च बध्यते. From Brahmanand, as quoted in Jivan Mukti Vaiveka, if son is not born, the parents are filled with sorrow. They try all sorts of means, scientific and unscientific, allowing this obsession to overshadow their all their other brilliant achievements. If chances favor the possibility of having a son, then anxiety raises its head from the time of conception. The mounting suspense may climax in an abortion, an unbearable catastrophe. If nothing of the sort happens, the delivery itself may prove to be very painful affair. Medical opinion is that it is fraught with more possibilities of death or deformation than any other natural situation imaginable. But the interesting fact is that the delivery is perhaps as painful to the father as it is to the mother. And such instances reveal how much a person has subjected himself to irrational self identity and to what extent he justifies it as natural. If one starts justifying, one may end by enjoying their very pain. The doors to spiritual striving are closed. There is a story of a merchant who left his home in Marwar immediately after marriage and managed to establish a thriving business in Burma. After 12 years of separation from the family, he decided to visit them and take his wife and his only son, whom he had never seen, back to Burma. At Calcutta port, he put up in a chowltry for the night and found it overwhelming with pilgrims from Ganga Sagar festival. He managed to evict some people from a room by bringing the manager and was awakened in the early morning by loud lamentations outside. Irritated, he went out to chide them when he found that one boy belonging to the group he had caused to be thrown out the previous night had succumbed to an attack of plague, and that the wretched mother of the disease was no other than his wife, come to meet him unannounced at the port. Such extraordinary situations prove that blood relationship does not go far in absolving you of the evil of attachment to related persons. It is not a physical fact, much less a law that you must suffer if the sun suffers. It is your mental attitude. The sun you see is your mental creation and invariably conflicts with the sun's self reality. True Vairagya will allow you to apply yourself to the later by freeing yourself from the former, the product of raga. This is to be understood in all the other instances quoted in the present shloka. You are not expected to disown your body, wife, son, or wealth, but you must avoid having them through raga. In trying to avoid this, one grows in spiritual stature, and that perhaps is the most relevant significance of all mundane transactions. As these details, though commonly known in all households, need to be pondered upon with benefit. जटास्या ग्रहरोगधिः कुमारस्य च मूर्खट उपनीते त्वविद्या त्वमनुद्वाहाश्च पंडिते युनश्च परादाराधिर्दरिद्र्यं च कुटुम्बिनः पितृर्दुःखस्य नश्यन्तो धानि सेन म्रियते तदा. This is from Brahmananda, is quoted in Jivana Mukti Viveka. Once born, the son immediately afflicts the parents with the anxiety to know his future, to make sure that it will be bright and unblemished. They seek astrologers and perform religious rites prescribed for Grah Shanti. Even modern parents who profess to have no faith in such matters give into such folly. If the son grows up without any trouble, he may turn out to be either dull or, if intelligent, uninterested in studies. Parents spare no pains in tackling this issue, going at the boy as soon as he returns from the school. No wonder the putra turns ripu not only unconsciously but quite obviously. If the boy does study well and achieve distinction, then that too creates a very harassing situation for the parents who find it difficult to get a suitably qualified bride for him. Thus on and on it goes till death, mercifully. releases the parent from the clutches of the son infatuation. Similar observations are made with regard to wife and wealth. Sada bitimule kalatre dhane va. Constant source of fear. If she is ugly, it is a curse. If she is beautiful, it is a greater curse. If she is not a good mixer, the husband complains that his social contacts are diminished thereby. If she begins to make contacts, he is stricken with suspicion and jealousy. The horrors and humiliation of amassing wealth are well known. To earn or not to earn, to save or to spend is a fearful issue. Such being the nature of these inevitable situations of ordinary life, it is to be expected that an intelligent person going through them will naturally seek to save himself by developing the correct attitude to things. And this is Vairagya. The Mundaka Upanishad therefore says, Pariksha Lokan Karmachitan Brahmano Nirved Maya Nasti Akrata Kratena. As a result of his experiments with life, the seeker of truth attains this passion by being convinced that the uncreate eternal fulfillment will not come through these ephemeral contacts. If such a conviction does not come, we wonder, Nakaschit virajyati aho. But the poet supplies the clue to the puzzle by saying, Katham tvata kata kashma vina tattva bodha. Mother, without thy glance, how can I how can awareness of the reality of life arise? That is to say, without this awareness, one is bound to the shadowy unrealities only. Here we are told that mere dosha drashti in things is not sufficient to infuse vairagya. Something definitely positive is needed. A monk was walking along the streets of a posh locality in Delhi and found a well dressed old man standing at the gate of a house and shedding profuse tears. Moved with pity, the sannyasi gently inquired of him the cause of his sorrow. This bungalow, the old man said, was constructed by me. I worked hard to make my business in Connaught Place a success. Now I have given the entire business to my only son. That car you see in the portico, I gave it to him last year at his wedding gift, as his wedding gift. And that rascal slapped me on the face at the breakfast table today. The monk explained that the modern generation was like that and that he should stay away from the children now that they are capable of caring for themselves. How can I stay alone in my old age? Where shall I go? Who will look after me? Ji replied to the monk. Don't worry. If you can come to Haridwar with me, I will see that you are put up in our ashram and all arrangements will be made for your daily needs. And you can pass your last days in holy company and contemplation. The face of the man fell, and with sudden irritation, he said, "Oh, that's why you come to sit in judgment over my plight? I see that everyone has an axe to grind. Is it not better that I be used by my son than by anyone else? It is true, I am unhappy. I was slapped, but then it was by my own son. How does that concern you?" So we find that neither precept nor practice does any good to such people. If they have to be rid of their misery, they must seek refuge in the motherhood of God and see everything as the product of her inscrutable power, Maya. The sense of belonging to one's own things should be replaced by a sense of belonging to the reality of things. One should develop the vision that sees one's own body, son, wife, or wealth as expressions of one's soul truth, the Atma-Bhava. Then they cease to be fetters. King Rishabh had 100 sons. When he renounced the world, he was asked by all the 100 what they should do. He replied, "Why renounce like me? If you can, or else strive to achieve Atma Bhava by any means till you are ready to go forth like a lion wherever God takes you." Rishi Yagyavalkya was one of the greatest Vedantins produced by India. It was he who enlightened Janaka, and being patronized by such monarchs, he commanded immense wealth and respect and lived a wholesome life. He had two wives, and when he took to sannyasa, he instructed both the wives into the path of liberation. Such examples are possible only when where there is a generally accepted ideal An incentive to lead the dynamic life of social obligation with